Welcome to OSH After the Bell podcast, where we bring you a fun and informative conversation about everything outside school hours care and give a voice to our fellow educators. So buckle up.
Hi everyone, welcome to OSH After the Bell podcast. I have with me today Barbi from Firefly. How are you doing, Barbi?
Hello, great, thank you.
That's good. I also have Cal, my good friend, who has been working with children for the last 12 years. He's an assistant coordinator of community and play. How are you doing, Cal?
I am very well, thank you, Saurabh.
That's nice. And also, following up from our last conversation, we have a different play worker, Izzy. How are you doing, Izzy? Welcome to our podcast.
Very good, mate. Very good, and good to be here with all you guys, of course, and talk about play. Love it.
Yeah, we actually learned so much from Angus, and we want to learn more. So Izzy has been a program manager at his service. He is a play worker, and he also likes to be called as a play worker inspired educator, just like Cal is. So welcome both of you to the podcast. I understand this is your first podcast.
Number one. That's
Number one.
Let's go.
This is our 23rd or 24th, and I still think this is my first. I still make so many mistakes when it comes to introducing.
I still don't know what I'm doing. So.
The big question is this live or can we edit it at the end?
No, we'll edit this at the end. Man.
There we go.
We just can't go live. We're not that professional yet. Okay. So, from last time when Angus was talking about playwork and playwork practices, and he mentioned playworker a few times, and what Barbi and I were thinking is the audience would love to know what defines or what makes a playworker. Is if I want to become a playworker, what do I do for that? What is it? Izzy, please.
All right. I think what defines a playworker is that it's someone that works with children, obviously, but they work with children in a way where play is their primary focus, providing play opportunities for these kids. And Playwork says this very clearly, supersedes the adult agendas that exist in our cultures, our societies, our schools. And it's about providing and working within a space where free play opportunities, and a play worker would define play as freely chosen, personally directed, and intrinsically motivated. So we're trying to create spaces, and not just spaces, but emotional environments that support children being able to engage in play that is free, personal, and intrinsic. So I guess there's 8 playwork principles. I'm sure Angus would have spoke about them at some point. And I mean, this is just a really simple one. This is principle number 5, and the role of the play worker is to support all children and young people in the creation of a space in which they can play. And I think that kind of puts it nice and simply, a space where children play, as I said before, it's not just the physical environment, it's the emotional environment, it's the relationship between adults and children. So I guess play work is the study of play, the study of how adults should or could interact in these environments to help maintain that pure play is going on as best as possible. So I think that's a broad idea of what a play worker does. I think if your other question about what do you need to do to be a play worker, look, there's an argument for you. I was going to say there's an argument for you don't need to do anything, and I say that because the conversations that we've all had with Calum, and Calum hasn't necessarily done anything official, but Calum's a play worker at heart, and sometimes doesn't get better than that as well. But there is another play work principle that addresses the idea that play workers stay up to date with current knowledge about play. And so that does involve, if you're a play worker, I guess, constant study, constant looking into play and its role of development within children and childhood. For me personally, there's online courses that I've done that are based out of the UK. If Angus hasn't already spoken about them, we can provide resources to get in touch with those people in the UK. It does come out of the UK because that's where this whole, field of study was born back in the 40s. It's out to America and other countries, but predominantly it's born in the UK, and that's where a lot of the information still comes from.
Right.
In the UK, you can do a bachelor, a master's, or a PhD in playwork. So widely recognised over there. And I think that's important to understand that it isn't this fringe movement that's, a bunch of, crazy Australians are trying to push onto everyone. It's well established in the world. It's a bit of a new movement coming into Australia, but a very important one, I think.
So I hear that there is something official someone could do to actually consider himself or herself as a play worker.
I think it does add a lot of content.
Value. Yeah.
No, there's a lot of value, but I think at the end of the day, the value comes down to how intuitive you are as an adult and how much appreciation you can have for play. And for some people, no matter how much study they have, they just can't get there, you know. And for some people, like you can read a couple of articles and you're like, makes perfect sense, and then you continue down that road.
Yeah. I meant paperwork as in it is official, but you still have to ongoingly do something about it. As we read, one of the principles is to, and I think that is applicable in anything which we do about children, isn't it? Like research is happening all the time, and one who considers himself or herself as an advocate of children's growth would like to align himself or herself with those studies, and so. Cal, I understand that you met Izzy in 2020. Is that where your inspiration about Playwork started, or you were always a bit aligned towards it?
Yeah, that kind of just got me a little way more inspired. I think I've been on the journey for a while, and it was just one of those things like I experienced so much myself as a child, and then doing all these things, you know, through my center, I was like, this feels right and looks right, but I didn't have the knowledge base behind it. And it was just kind of like my own little journey. And then it was kind of like a fork in the road attending, a PD session with Izzy and Angus. And I'm like, this is it. Like, I was just so inspired from then on. Then the last like 18 months has just been going ham to try and, you know, learn as much as I can and input as much as I can to the center. So it's been a great journey.
And given that now you have, let's say, a language around it, you know how you said that you're doing something similar, and then you went to the PD, and it's good to know that other people think alike, and you go, wow, this is amazing. So did it, what sort of transformation, or you were already there, but now since you have the language, is it easier for you to communicate that to other people about the importance of play in children's lives? Or?
Oh, so much. And that was the whole problem with me. Like I felt it innately, but I wasn't sure how to explain it in that language. And just through constant research, I'm like, everything just kept blowing up in my eyes. I'm like, this makes so much sense. This is everything I felt, but now it's there written, and I can be like, I can explain this in a way that I can reach anyone really who was on that journey. So it's been so great.
I call myself Calum's roadblock because we work together, and and I can say basically Cal's a big kid in regards to play. From day one, I don't know when we started working together, maybe 2012.
2012, yeah.
And then, like Izzy said, like this development, I don't even know when Playworker started becoming more of a thing here, but Cal's just always had a natural affinity to that. And then me as a roadblock, because everything I've been taught along the way, just also kind of been that no to Cal. And then, like he said, I remember sitting at that training with Izzy and Angus, and everything they're describing, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what you're doing, Cal. Like, I also got a better understanding. So I also think anyone that's interested in Playwork, get your supervisor to go as well.
Don't be the only one in the meeting.
Yeah, because I have to admit, like, because a lot of the time, like as the nominated supervisor, you're worried a lot about all those repercussions that come back on you. But then going to that training, like you learn a lot of why not to worry and why to let it happen and all the benefits from it. It's like that risk-benefit perspective, but I definitely highly recommend it. And I just feel bad how much I was roadblocked to Cal.
It's fine. It was fine. Another thing is everyone's journey, and like I think Angus said in other podcasts, it's a lot of perception, and it's like you're not here, you're neither here nor there. Like you're on your journey, you're learning. Like be humble to. You can learn and change your ideals and ideas. So, it was fine,
I have to admit, I changed my train of thought on everything as well through this.
I think as a team member, or any meeting or any PD or any learning you do, you should do it as a team, just so that there's no disagreements within it, or at least if you may still hear things differently, but then you have something to talk about it rather than being a roadblock. Because when I saw your team, I didn't see that, or I couldn't perceive when I was running my workshops that Barbie could be a roadblock to anyone because I thought that your team was working really good, but then there could still be ideological differences, philosophical differences, and that all comes down to what you have been exposed to in the past, and there could be some conscious exposures, which is going to the PDs, or unconscious exposures, which is the culture which we grew up in.
And I think one big thing was at that training, I think one of the first things they said is if you want to do this alone, nothing's going to change. And I feel like I was on that road for so long. I was like, I like this, and I was on that journey. But I'm like, I'm not going to see any change unless everyone's on board with this, or we're all starting to learn. So that really was the biggest thing for me when I heard that. I'm like, here we go. Here's the change.
And not redefining this. I'm reading the definition again of play from the last time, and Izzy did mention that again. Some playwork, a play is something children are freely chosen, intrinsically motivated, and the third character was personally driven. Is that did I say it right?
Personally directed.
Personally directed, not driven, directed. Personally directed. Intrinsically motivated, freely chosen. That is such an important thing to. Like, every time I read that, I go, this is so important. That adult agenda needs to be sometimes diluted when children are choosing that thing. Izzy, you mentioned something in the past about the power of narrative within play. Is that something? I would love to know what that means.
That is just something that I've really observed over the last year or so and taken really deep interest in. And I think it relates back to humanity in general, our need and our ability to comprehend through stories and through narratives. No matter what you feel about religion, like quite often religions are passed down successfully through some underlying story so that it can maintain and permeate through different generations and different cultures. And I see that so obviously in play, and it's so interesting to see how, children are doing something, and it's almost like not all the time, because play differs a lot, but a lot of the time it's almost like they can't act unless they have embedded some type of, and it can be so basic, it doesn't need to be complex, but some type of narrative underneath their play. Thinking of an example that when I was watching a bunch of like grade 2 to 3 girls, and we got all these tires at our service, heavy tires, small tires, whatever, and they were creating a base. And the reason that they were creating the base, there was like 5 girls, and I think it was to make some sort of shop. It might have been a salon or something like that. But they were really excited about making a salon. As they were building this base, they were talking about the different roles that they would take on within the salon. And mind you, this building of the base involved a lot of like them dragging heavy tires, communicating about how they're going to stack these heavy tires on top of each other, trial and error when it comes to stacking these heavy tires on top of each other. And this, what we would call as play workers, like this play frame existed for about 15 minutes. And at the end of it, once they'd completely built the base that they wanted to build, they just abandoned the play frame, and they totally forgot about the game of shop or salon that they were going to play. They totally forgot about the roles that they were meant to play at the end. They made the base, they stood around it for a minute or two, didn't really get involved in the game, and the whole group of girls went on and did something else. And it's so interesting that for 20 minutes, they just put in such effort, they put in such detail, they communicated so deliberately with each other. And at the end of the day, it wasn't even about the salon, but it was that underlying narrative in that creative process that allowed them to have some context to build something, to communicate in really unique ways that we want our kids communicating in, asking for help, trial and error, all these sorts of elements that are coming out. And it's interesting how important the narrative is, but at the same time, the narrative is a complete waste of time sometimes, and it actually has no context on the play. And when you go into play, you find that sort of almost everything does that. Everything is so important and completely not important at the same time. I love that. And the narrative aspect of that is really, really interesting to observe, I think.
It's funny because as an adult, I'm thinking, oh, what happened to that salon then?
Yeah, exactly. As adults, we're so outcome focused.
Yeah.
We might jump in there and say, well, what are you guys trying to create? And they're like, well, we're trying to create a salon. It's like, cool, let me help. And maybe I just took that 20-minute process down to a 5-minute process, they're still at the end, they're like, oh, well, we didn't know it at the time, but we actually don't want to play Salon. It was just something to trick us into doing this. It's just a total misunderstanding from the adult into what the whole goal of this play is. We love outcomes help us talk to assessors, they help us talk to parents, they help us convince ourselves that there's development going on. But the more study of play work, the more we understand about play, the more we understand that outcomes are just happening. And it turns into more of I can just observe this and write down the outcomes, and I don't need to get involved or change the play or anything at all. And if I do, then I understand that the outcomes actually won't happen, which is like this contradiction that happens between, I guess, the framework and the nature of children sometimes.
It's good that when you mention that, and it also depends on what are we observing for, isn't it? Like more knowledge you have about play work, and then you go, I am observing, and there are things happening. Full stop. Whereas if I don't have the understanding, I might be looking for the final outcome and say, hey, that thing is not there yet, or that was in our program that we're going to make cubby houses. 0 cubby houses are made today. My program failed, or I'm not a good enough educator who didn't allow. Who couldn't convince kids to make cubby houses. Oh, my cubby houses are better than your cubby houses. And all these adults get in, whereas children might start the cubby house, but may not end it. And it is still, some outcomes have been achieved. It's just that we are not aware of it, or that our perspective is so much guided by something other agenda, as you mentioned, adult agenda versus children's agenda. And it's like driven by something else. And here I'm still thinking, oh, damn it, the salon wasn't made. Oh, that's just so hard work for 20 minutes. I had my camera ready for that, and damn it, the salon's not ready. And that's so interesting. The narratives within play, everything is important, and yet nothing is at times.
Yes.
So yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. That's a really good example for someone who is outcome driven versus someone who is process driven. Like we say that, enjoy the process rather than the outcome. And here there are children who are doing it, and we are waiting for the final outcome to happen. So yeah, that's good. So you mentioned something in the past about the children turn chaos into order. What's that? Chaos into order? Like when I saw that, there are different theories on chaos versus order, but I just wondered how play and children do this, how children do this while they're playing.
Well, I think that comes down really to I think this is it's about the physical environment that you provide children and how it's set up. And we've observed, and through our study of Playwork, sort of, mash these ideas together. But what we find is you could look at our environment, and for those that haven't seen it or don't know it, Camp Hill Osh, you could check out our Facebook page. It's predominantly loose parts, which means that there's, call it what you want, but there's junk, reusable junk, just sort of scattered everywhere for the children to do whatever they want with. And the fact that it's scattered, that there's no purpose in how it's put out, that there's no specific set of instructions as to what they're supposed to do with it, puts children in a position, naturally, we don't need to force them into this, and naturally puts them in a position where they walk into that environment, they assess the chaos, and within Playwork, we want to get to the edge of chaos because we're still considering safety measures and hazards in the environment. So they look out at the edge of chaos, and the first thing that they will want to do in their play is take all of those random pieces of material and create some form of order out of it so that there's something that provides a context that they can play around. And on the other end of the spectrum, we find, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, if you put children in a physical environment that is really structured, it's really obvious that things go in specific places, things have very specific uses, you'll find that what the children will naturally do is try and, if they're given the free rein, tear that apart and make it more chaotic. And we look at children as having this almost perfect balance embedded in them, where they can find the ludocentric point, which is the ultimate playful point, which balances chaos and order almost perfectly, probably not perfectly, but you could say perfectly for that kid at that time. And this is so if we create these environments, we're now putting the children in a space where they're getting used to practicing creating order in their lives, and order that means something, and order that provides real experiences where they can be like, that was good. That helped me out. That allowed me to play with my friends. And they're developing this intrinsic understanding of the need of order, rules, roles, and all this sort of stuff. Instead of them pushing back the other way and growing up being like, I hate rules. I'm sick of this order. It's so stifling. I just want it to go away. And so we see that as a huge aspect of childhood that's missing at the moment, is that chaotic environment where they can take it upon themselves to create that order. And I think that goes to like a broad look at humanity. When you look at what humans have done, you know, we were, whether it was 200,000 years ago, whatever it was, you could say that we were born into a very chaotic situation where we didn't have much control over the physical environment. And the whole process of humans getting to where we're going is taking that chaos and creating some sort of order out of it so that we can operate within societies, so that we can communicate, so that we can create families that love each other and all of this. And it's so interesting, again, to see that same process play itself out within play so that these children get used to these ideas.
Yeah. So I put in the notes that I sent to Sarah, not to you guys, but I saw a great organization offering professional development the other day, but it was called Setting Up Beautiful Outdoor Spaces Focused on Learning and Aesthetics. Does that just kind of do the opposite of everything you just mentioned? Because I thought, like, when does the aesthetics kind of take over or get in the way of the play? And if the aesthetics is the focus, is it naturally kind of already in the way?
I think if the aesthetic is an adult aesthetic, then yeah, it's going to get in the way, because if you want your space to look beautiful and you go out there and kids are messing it up, your adult agenda is going to be so if that's your intention to make this space look pretty from your eyes, then it's a struggle. And I don't know, stop me if Angus spoke about this last week, but we've come to the conclusion that the fact that it looks messy and junky is ultimately important, not just for the reasons that I mentioned, but also considering how children's lives are structured with so much order, so many rights and wrongs in the classroom, so many goods and bads. When they step into an environment that is messy, chaotic, it intrinsically tells the kid, there's no wrong answer here. There's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go. You can't be wrong. You won't be demonized for being wrong. Everything is already wrong anyway. So the messy aesthetic from our perspective is crucial for children to be able to have a sense of like just relaxation and understanding that this is their environment.
You said something before too. You said if it's adult aesthetics. So I've never thought of looking at it if it can have like a child aesthetics to it, because what they see is chaos is probably completely different to someone else.
Yeah.
And we've probably never really thought about, I know myself, haven't really thought of it in that way.
You know, when I was at your service, Barbie, this is how I would always remember Cal and seeing him for the first time. Here we are trying to get kids in doing something, and there was Cal in the sand pit. Children were having fun. Cal was having fun. You couldn't distinguish between children and Cal. They were having the best time. And I was thinking, here I can sit here and say, okay, let's do this, let's do that. Let's not allow kids to do this. Let's not allow kids to do that. And there is fun going on right now in this very moment. And there's a word you chose, the word you said earlier, the ultimate play point. What was that? What's that word or term you used?
Ludocentric.
Should I spell it? I would.
I'm pretty sure Ludocentric.
Ludocentric. Okay, got it. Okay. Well, thank you. So I think at that time I was just seeing how from an adult's perspective there was a chaos, but I don't think Cal or the kids would have said that was a chaotic. And maybe Cal, you don't even remember what I'm talking about, but I do remember that. But that wasn't. I'm sure, Cal, that wasn't the only time that you had the best time of your life with the kids in the sand pit. But I think that was organically just there for the kids when an adult just moved out of their way and in fact started playing the game the kids were playing, but not kind of guiding it or taking them somewhere, such as the salon making or creating an aesthetic which would be good. What is that? Am I saying that right, Cal?
Yeah, well, it's like in my kind of studies now, it's just kind of finding like what is your involvement? Is it you're just observing from a distance? Is it a simple involvement? Is it just they like, can I have a pen? You know, to keep coloring, and then they grab and they keep going, and the cycle continues. Is it more of a medial involvement where they want to hit a tennis ball back and forth with you? Is it a complex involvement when you're getting into all the the deep kind of play where you're still not controlling it, but you might be part of their narrative now. Like you wear so many different hats in the play, and the idea is to keep the play flowing without adulterating it. So it's just figuring out where do you stand in this play, and that's why the chaos is great. I've had staff say putting out the things. I'm like, chuck it out, put it on the floor, indoor environment, just chuck out the trains. And I'm like, why? I'm like, just watch, and like chuck it out. They see that cue, the environment's the cue. They look around. The first thing they walk in the door, they see that cue, they see those trains, and and they start organizing exactly what Izzy's saying. They turn the chaos into order. It doesn't matter where it is. That's what they're going to do. You don't have to have these, beautiful aesthetic environments that that looks good to us. Like, watch the kids create the order.
And I know when Cal was educational leader too, when you'd program things, and a lot of other educators might come up and go, oh, they're not interested, and Cal would be like, just go start, just go have a go. And then, because the kids had great relationships to start, once the staff did it, the kids would kind of come as well. Like, again, this is just for those kids that wanted to do those activities. But that played a huge difference. Instead of just standing there going, no kid wants to do this, instead just go do it. I know with Cal, when he mentioned that train thing, he has fantastic relationships with children too. So this also plays a part. If Cal was sitting down playing anything, it could be anything, kids will naturally gravitate to him to just see what he's doing as well, because they're always interested.
I was acting sometimes you act as a cue for the child. Sometimes they might not be able to, or they for whatever reason find it hard to get in there. So it's 7 a.m. They just woke up. You act as that bridge for them, coming in, and then that might be able to, help them to be able to communicate with other children. So, your role can be so important for them to just jump in and be able to play at some point as well, without adulterating them. You're just supporting them.
And can I say with that as well, first of all, a lot of those terms that you just used, Cal, like medial, simple interventions, adulteration, cues, and all this sort of stuff, this is language that comes from the Playwork field study. And that's just another plug of everyone, I believe, should, if they're working with kids, should go and study that so they understand these concepts that Cal's talking about, and they understand Playwork. It doesn't just say, oh, kids should play, and then just leaves it. It goes layers deep, and it goes layers in terms of what's your role in this environment and how do you affect this environment. And another thing as well, what you spoke about then, Cal and Barbie, about sometimes kids they don't seem interested. And this is something that we find that's not all services, but some services, is that people put loose parts out and the kids are like, I don't know what to do with that. I think we need to appreciate that there's so much play deprivation that's going on, especially with the generation we're working through, that they don't, kids are trained to wait for permission for adults to be like, oh yeah, you can do that. Oh, why don't you try this? And when you first start going down this road of backing off and trying to allow the kids to intrinsically get involved in this stuff, you may need to help them along the way. You may need to provide play cues so that it says it's all right to play with this stuff. And I think the journey is, as the kids get more used to these environments and more used to the fact that, oh, we can do more now, and there's not a right way of doing things as players, because we slowly reduce how much we, I guess, actively provide cues through ourselves. It's not to say that we're not sensitive, and we might need to always do that for specific kids, but in general, we've found that the kids can be confused to start with because they're not used to this type of working. And sorry, one more thing I want to say before we move on from the chaos and order thing, and this is this is such a deep topic as well, but if you provide this chaotic environment with loose parts or a manipulatable environment, it's so important that the adults understand what their role in that space is. Because as soon as you come in, no matter what the environment looks like, and you say, oh, no, don't do that like that, do it like this. Or what we spoke about earlier, Sarah, oh, you're making a salon, let me help you do this. It falls apart anyway. There's two sides to this coin. There's the physical environment, and then there's dealing with our adult agendas, dealing with our adult biases, understanding what adulteration is, studying so that we understand our role within the play, and those two things together create an environment that allows chaos to turn into order for these kids.
So it's a balance which we can learn about. There is enough training out there which we learn about this particular balance that we could, how our intervention or how our involvement should look like. And as Cal was saying earlier, am I really getting into complex thing? Am I just am one of the participants of this play? And not wanting to not wanting to corrupt this game from what they were doing. You mentioned something about how, let's say there is a free loose parts there, and children are like, oh, so what do we do now? And then you mentioned how adults can give them cues. Now here's the challenge for some of the adults. Now they haven't played themselves, and they have forgotten how to play as an adult. Like, and that's the question which I asked in the last podcast as well. That, hey, what about adult play? Like when we think about play, we always think about children laughing, running around, but I'm not sure if adults are doing these three things. Intrinsically motivated, personally directed, freely chosen. It could be any act, but that living in the moment, because that's how I see those three things. When you are doing those three things, you are in the moment, you're in the now, because you're doing it freely chosen. This is like being present, being mindful of what you're doing. And when I realized that, if I can ask some adults, okay, give them cues, and adults like, I don't know what to do with that tire. Like, I just got no idea. So this joy needs to be with adults as well. And that's what I saw in Cal. There was a joy within him, and there was a being present to the environment within him, such that children were drawn to it. And then they started playing, and there was no, from what I saw, no corruption of activity. This was just.
Yep.
I think it was important. Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, I think it was so important for me. But I've always been just so playful. Like it just made so much enjoyment just for life in general. But, it's just, like you said, these kids are trying to play, like me being in a playful state, just always kept my mind in that, and always kind of saw it through a lens that the children may or may not see it. And as Izzy touched on, the whole idea of, offering that support, that scaffolding, you scaffold a building, you're trying to build a building, you put up all the scaffolding to build it, you're supporting it, and then you take it away, as it gradually, is built. That's kind of what we do in play. We kind of support it when they might not know what to do, because they have been so, told that they must ask permission to do this or that. So you need to sometimes offer those cues and support. I mean, you just, pull yourself away.
I think it's important too what Saurubh said about, like, a lot of educators may have not played, and we've got a lot of educators that are quite young in the industry. They may have just been in primary school 6 years ago, or we even had junior educators, so it may have not even been long since they're in that environment where they weren't allowed to do these things. So I guess having those conversations or training with everyone at all levels, and what you can do, like, and they may not realize what they can do and what they can let the kids do. Like, you don't have to intervene if they're doing this, and this is why, like that kind of knowledge, because it'll be stuck in them too. I know for me, I'm older, so play was completely different when I was young. You're allowed to do what you want. So it's so different. One thing though, because I know, Cal, when you started with us, you were still young and you had that natural play, like, he
still is young.
Yeah. 12 years in all, she started when he was 10. No, but do you know where it even came from, or is it just sometimes just a personality trait that sometimes comes from educators?
It was that. It was freedom to move and play, and I think that was how I've got to this point where I am now. Is a lot of just reflection on my own childhood and what I was allowed to do. Everyone talks about just having that freedom. Like, I just went out and played. Mum's like, see you later, and then you just come home. Didn't have a phone, just go out. And I did all these crazy things. Like, I make glove guns and go, shooting chickpeas around the school. And so every time, like, kids doing something that might be a little bit dangerous, I kind of reflect back. I was like, God, I did worse. I did way worse.
That was me too.
Yeah, and they're exploring that play. I'm like, well, yeah, let's try and do this if you want to keep doing it, because you like it, and I've had this reflective time as well. So I was truly shaped by that, and I think as time's gone on, that's that internal and external locus of control, how in control you think you are of your life. And I feel like I wasn't having the parental, they was still guiding and being my parents, but in terms of what I did, like, I could just kind of do what I want in that sense. So I had that, like, I feel like I'm in control of my life, where society it's going towards, maybe due to a lot of external factors, that fear mongering outside, how we want to control our kids because we fear for their safety and so forth. So that's why I think Angus mentioned his last podcast, like, Push offers a very unique opportunity where kids can be in this environment where we can create, so they can play in a way which they would like to. And
on that, Cal, as well, I want to say a couple of things. Hold on, I wrote them down while you guys were talking. Yeah, like, like that idea that like we're now we now have educators coming in that may not have the play experiences that the older generation have is a really big issue, because Playwork actually really actively uses our own play memories to understand what play is about and to get back to the roots, all the things that you just spoke about, Cal. And it's interesting when we're in a room and there might be half the room that's actually like, I never really honest, like I just didn't, no one told, like, and so they can't gain faith out of their own memories of play. And I think that's potentially a really critical point, where if the whole generation of educators that are coming through are missing these experiences, then how do we make that link between how important play is if they don't even know it within themselves? So that's like more of a point.
It's like, it's like an experiential gap. Like one example could be, let's say if we have educators who have never climbed trees.
Oh, I wrote that down.
There's a reason why we are doing this podcast together, Barbi. When you sent me that email in the morning, I'm like, thank you, Barbi. Otherwise I would be so lost. So the thing is, like for instance, like what if the educators have not ever climbed the trees themselves, and now they are having they have to risk assess that activity, but what are they? The risk assessment is more like what the fears out there are, but then problem solving, but they just see the problem, but they don't see the solution of it because they haven't yet done, because they don't have that in their cognition, they don't have that in their memory. And so I think when Izzy mentioned something about how do we do the adults, so as he was talking about this gap, I thought maybe we should have, like, every weekend we should have like a adult play, intrinsically motivated, freely chosen play directed sessions we should have in outside school care, where adults can climb trees and say, oh look, this is not that hard now, is it? And then allow children to do it, and then perhaps because they have lived that experience, that they could communicate those experiences with kids, and perhaps maybe get more motivated to allow children to climb trees. And this is just an example, but it actually is about other areas which we haven't experienced. And so, Izzy, would you say that you also had a childhood where you were like playing and like Cal, freely directed?
Like Cal, and just to cement that point as well, like I lived near a rainforest on the Sunshine Coast, which is in Queensland, and I didn't always go to the rainforest, but if I wanted to, like, me and 5 mates from the street would do that. We grew up in that environment as well, and from my parents, it was be home before the lights turn off. Like, that was enough to have those experiences. And it's a shame because when I came into the OSHC industry, and even now, I understand, unfortunately, we're still kind of looked at a little bit as glorified babysitters from particular points of view. I feel like, unfortunately, maybe even within the industry itself, like the way that we get looked, our perception through the eyes of teachers and other things. But from my perspective, I look around and I'm so convinced of the importance of children being able to do stuff away from the eyes of adults, because in that, when they don't think that they have adults around to solve their issues, they naturally have to risk assess for themselves. They need to be responsible of their own actions. They can't be completely mean to some kid because that kid might just hit them, like there's these real natural consequences that are so critical for our development as humans. And I look around, I'm like, I don't see an opportunity for that anymore. And I live in Brisbane City at the moment, and it's, small backyards, smaller families, busy roads everywhere. Cal, as you mentioned, the heightened fear of like what's going on outside, all of these things don't provide opportunities for kids to leave the eyes of the adults. So, and OSH isn't perfect. We're there as adults. The fact that we're there at all as play workers, we'll appreciate that we're adulterating the space, full stop. And we need to work with that understanding. But as much as we can we give them some experiences where at least it feels like we're barely there? We'll save them at the end, but they got to go through all of this stuff within their play themselves. And if we take that opportunity away from kids, in my eyes, like that's as critical as it gets. And Cal, you mentioned the internal and external locus of control. Like, in those times when they're in control of their lives is when they develop the feeling that I'm in control of my life. And if there's no space for that in the day because they've had breakfast, gone to school, gone and done an extracurricular activity of any sort, gone home, done their homework, there's no space for that. And that is very well linked and correlated with the rise of anxiety and depression in our adolescents that we're having. And I don't think it's a coincidence.
It's very important to just recognize this moment right here, how in the childhood, let's say we have adult driven agendas, let's say, and just playing this as an example here, where you tell the child what he or she should do. For instance, this is the breakfast time, this is homework time, this is school time, this is this time, that time, or extracurricular time, right? And suddenly when they become adults, you say, okay, now you're on your own. Now live your life, find your spirituality, yes. Find this, find that. Yeah. And the child is like, hang on, I need a structure because I haven't yet. Mm-hmm. And it may sound very cliche, but hey, I haven't solved the problem without you, dad, or haven't solved the problem without a teacher, or this environment is so free that I need structure in it, and someone external should come and look into that. Or if it is not working, it must be someone else's fault. That why is it not working? So it's so important that this is a paradigm shift, that you have adult driven agendas for the whole childhood, and then the child becomes an adult and you go, all right, you're free now, all right, good luck, see you later. And they may feel lost.
Yeah. And like, I know this isn't play, but what we can do in our services too, like how strict are we on the routine that they have to eat in a certain place?
Very strict sometimes.
I have to sit on sit on a chair. Because I was just thinking, I've got a 2-year-old toddler. I let her pick where she wants to eat. She wants to eat there. That's fine, within reason. Like obviously not somewhere. I mean, sometimes she wants to go sit in the car. Sometimes I don't care. That's fine. Yeah. But what are we doing with the children in regards to their choice? Even your afternoon tea, like, is it just one choice they've got? Like, is there not even a choice? Is your menu a rotating menu that the kids have no say in? I guess this is all why children's choice and agency is important. But there's so many things, not just in play, that goes in. And even the pack-up time, like, why is pack-up time pack-up time?
Yeah.
Is it like, what's the reason for it? Is it just because it's 5 p.m. or is it, or like, I don't know.
Because I have to go home and I need to pack up before I go home. And I don't want to stay back.
But what about the kid that's still there till 6? So I was always pretty big on that. Like, you still have to do things, but there's probably things to think about and reflect on. Here's that critical reflection, and think of how you're doing it now. How's it working for the kids? What could you change? Why do you have to come inside at a certain time? Like, especially when going into the longer
actually
days.
that reminded me of what Izzy said earlier about babysitters, or how perspective could be a babysitter. If anyone says, I don't want to be called a babysitter, I'm here as an advocate of children and of their lives. Well, if somebody has a strict regime, like as you were mentioning earlier, that this time this happened, this time that happened, that time this happens, well, that's the definition of a babysitter. So if we want to move away from it, perhaps just stop doing those things and allow children to experience those experiences. And if you haven't had it, look, I'm from India, of course, so my experiences were very different than experiences kids are having here. So for me, many times when I'm with children, I let them guide me. See, I didn't know handball. I didn't grow up playing handball. So I had no idea about handballs and rollies and duns and kings. I had no idea. So for me, I couldn't corrupt that, because I was like, okay, teach me. Like, I've got no idea about this. I never made cubby houses when I was a kid. Because there was no space to make cubby houses. Like, okay, teach me how to make the cubby houses. So for me, it came automatically. But I just wonder how it is so important that if you allow the children to be the leaders or lead certain things, and you be the adult observing certain things, and as Izzy said, and I'm be in that balance, that is how you move away from that perspective, at least from within. People may still call you babysitters, but that's okay. I mean, let them say what they are saying. And it just tells me how important outside school eye care is.
Mm-hmm. And I think that almost like folds over into a question maybe beyond play and more about like childhood and taking a holistic approach. And I also want to just mention, and I think we'd all agree, maybe not, which is fine, obviously, but it's not to say that there's no time for structure in kids' life. Kids, I believe that kids, certain environments need structure, and it's certain people's responsibility to provide that structure. And again, it's not that, but it's, if we're working as play workers from that mentality, that in our spaces, and if we're talking about before and after school care, we got maybe 2 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, where that's our goal as play workers. We're trying to provide time, because we understand that I don't know when else they're going to get that. The balance is off between structure and, I don't know, non-structure, child-led structure. And it's not to say they completely don't need structure in their lives. And I think, sometimes people take that the wrong way as well.
No, structure is good. And that's the balance between structure and chaos. We earlier also saw how the would play allowed. And that's, therefore I said how after school care is so important. It seems like an exclusive place where you can create an environment where these things are possible. You may not be able to do that in school, and understandably, you have 28 kids, one teacher, you have to still fulfill the curriculum, and that's important also. But after school care gives you this exclusive opportunity to do that, and I think that we should all be thankful about it, or at least be proud of the fact that we are in that exclusive environment and we get to do that with children, and that's how I see it. What do you think?
And I think just for individual educators, as long as we appreciate how important this time could be for these kids, then that just allows us to be in that environment and have some purpose and some passion and some understanding that what we're doing is, whether anyone outside says that, we're glorified babysitters or that whatever, it does, as long as we know why we're here and what we're doing, then it provides purpose for us.
Exactly.
I think that's so important to understand.
I think one of the first things I ever was told when I first started in childcare was, you're going to have kids that are there 5 mornings, 5 afternoons a week. You're going to see their child awake more than their parents will in a week. And that just put such an onus on me. I thought just like, wow, what influence do I have in their lives? Like, what am I going to, what do I offer them? And just through this whole journey of Playwork, I'm like, we can make such a positive, beautiful impact in their life by giving them time and space to explore, what they want to do. So,
yeah. I don't know if you can do it now because it's COVID, but when they start coming back, I know there's a lot of children that work at your service that were kids when you were an educator or coming back to volunteer. You should ask them some of these questions too and see what their mindset is, if they even noticed if there was a restriction in play. This is just me, like, out of curiosity. I'd love to know their thoughts, because I've heard some names thrown around who were interested in volunteering. I'm like, I'd love to know what they would think and what they would want. Might be a good perspective. I don't know if you've spoken to anyone now or remember. Yeah.
They talk about the computers.
We got rid of the computers one year.
I threw them out. I said they went on a holiday.
Yeah, I told them they went on somewhere in Europe to some kids that needed it. But we were just having, I guess, less play, and there was a bit of a barrier to play, we found.
That's an interesting point though as well, and I don't 100% have a landing spot on this as well, but if we take that definition of freely chosen, personally directed, and intrinsically motivated, how does that fit in with video games and technology?
Yeah, how does that?
Well, for me, I think the way I understand it, and I think we could actually introduce more technology to our service to give these the opportunity, because they need to learn how to play with technology, because that's what they're going into. But I think the answer is, it's not that, first of all, first 5 years of kids' life, personally, I believe that there's just some brain development that goes on that might need to be removed from technology potentially, but I'm not a neuroscientist. But past that, I believe that it's more important to provide kids with real opportunities outside of video games and iPads and that. And through that, we've found that kids aren't so obsessed with iPads and video games. Like, if they're going home, like we said before, and there's a small backyard and there's not really many kids to play with and all that, well, then absolutely I'm going to jump in and stare at a screen. Like, there's nothing else to do. And absolutely, if I do that for long enough, I'm going to start getting addicted, like we all are as adults, to our phones. And then that sets a trajectory of my life. And, from our perspective, we don't necessarily see that as a great thing. But if we're providing outdoor, indoor spaces that allow for children to do, engage in risk, engage to manipulate the environment, engage to build cubbies with hammers and nails and all these other things, then I think the balance of how they use technology is far more palatable for our minds anyway. And I think it'll, adds in that play of technology. And I don't think we can necessarily disregard that. It's a hard thing to deal with though.
But technology isn't the devil, I think we found a pretty good way to go about it. Like, we have tablets, and I don't think there's no games on it. It's Spotify. It's the video camera. it's just another resource. It's another tool. It's another affordance for them to then engage in whatever play they want. If they want to film something, or you go onto the tablet, you find like 6 different playlists that they've made of all the songs. Like you'll constantly walk around an environment and hear about 8 different types of music all being played at once. It's absolutely chaos,
Mm.
But we found that kind of beautiful spot where we found technology is a benefit, and it is personally directed, intrinsically motivated for them to do how they wish they want with it.
I think the change from the desktop to the tablets too, like the desktop, although it's bigger, it's just kind of a one-on-one. And like Cal's describing, a lot of the children that had a tablet, it was more than one-on-one. It was kind of it was an activity, like it was play for them. And a lot of videos of blowing up people on it, like you can make those explosions on it and stuff like that, or just things, aliens in the background and stuff like that, just whatever they wanted to do.
And I remember, like, a part of my childhood, Sarah, was spending a whole 2-week vacation care period with my mates making a movie called Agent Jack Steele, in which we were just like ninja warriors running around. Like, that was a part of my childhood too, with a video camera.
Yeah. So, and you know what, like you mentioned, so I'm going to go back to what you asked Cal as an curiosity about interviewing children, So when I was interviewing children at my own service, going back, this is 3-4 years ago for my studies, and I found how children will mention structure, some structure as an afternoon tea time, They will mention structure. They'll also mention how they get bored of sometimes of that structure, but they will also in the same interview mention how important that is for them. So, when we think that children don't know and that we become the conduit of knowledge that they should get, well, that's what needs to stop, because children get it. They know it's good for me, but it's boring also, but it's good for me. Like, there is already an existing conflict in their minds. We don't have to always necessarily go and tell them, this is important, this is important, this is important, rules are important, rules are important. Children know the rules are important, as if we also know it's important to drive with 10 and 2. Wonder how many times we drive with 10 and 2. We know it's important, but at the same time, it's in that moment, it wasn't the most attractive thing. Therefore, the kid did not listen to you. It's not not necessarily a sign of disrespect from the child. And it's very funny how children did mention a lot of things we did in after school care, and many of them, they had such a different perspective, and that's what I'm analyzing at the moment. But there's such a different perspective of what children think. Even that computer you mentioned in one of the interviews, you mentioned there are 6 out of 20 interviews. In 6 interviews, they mentioned a tree. That tree got cut, and it was a tree was there for a long time. And 6 interviews mentioned about the tree. And as an adult, I didn't even notice the tree is gone. So it was so interesting that children know, they get it. There's already an existing intelligence there. It's just us sometimes, as I've used the word in the past, maybe corrupted because we think they don't know it and that I have to tell them what to do. And that's where I think it's very important, at least in play, given that we haven't had great experiences in play. I'm talking we as in the new educators who are coming in and who might not have had the experience in play, but have these kids may show us something that we've missed out in our own childhood. And that definitely happened with me many times, because I didn't play the games they're playing here. So
I think on that, Sarah, that kind of reminds me of what you were talking about before about how what are adults do playful, how do we live in the moment in our lives, and that sort of stuff. And I think through doing enough research and, to the point where you can have a legitimate respect for the process of play, it allows you to then work in your service. And for me, once I've really understood what's going on here, it's kind of opened me up to receive, it sounds corny, but teachings from these kids every day on how to be and how to act, and, what makes friendships work, what makes, communication, collaboration work. But if we look at play as this frivolous thing that kids do and it wastes time, but it gives us adults a break because they're playing, well, then who cares what they do or how they do it? We don't need to look at it. But if we understand the process that play is, that it drives us forward, well, then now I'm going to look at kids and I'm going to look at myself, and just naturally it's going to start permeating onto me these ideas of present momentness, of not worrying about the outcome of things, doing things for the process. And these are all great spiritual things that we talk about, but through, I've been hanging out with kids for 10 years, and probably for 6 years, 7 years, it's been in what I would consider a pretty predominant play work environment. And in those years, I feel like I've become, I don't know, I don't want to say a better person, but I've grown and developed because I respect what the kids do, so I pay a different type of attention to it.
Oh no, I fully accept. I would say you can use the word better person. Doesn't matter. It is that. Like we work with kids, and sometimes so I have an example to share with you, which is which I kind of realized it, did it in the past, but I waved away from it. And then last week when we had the podcast, I learned something. So I take my dog out to this dog park all the time, yeah. And because I've recently moved to this area, he's quite timid at the moment. In the previous dog park, he was the dominant dog. He would bark at dogs, he will play, and he'll do whatever he wants to do. And he had been going there since he was 6 months old, and now he's almost 4. But at this dog park, there are 2 factors which I think are impacting him. A, he's new to the dog park, and B, there are also big dogs in this dog park. Okay. So what I started doing a couple of weeks ago is I started running with him. Like there's a game he and I play, and I just push him, and then I chase him, and he runs away, and then I run away, and he chases me, and we do that. So I automatically started doing that so that he could say hello to other dogs, because every time he started playing with me, dogs came to him and started saying hello. So here's, I am thinking, oh, my dog should play at the dog park. My dog should play at the dog park and should make friends at the dog park. I got so driven by that. And influenced by that, that I actually forgot, what does my dog want to do? What does Serbi wants to do at the dog park? And I realized day before yesterday, that I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to let him be. If he comes to me and pushes me, and that's a cue for his play, I'll chase him. But if he just wants to stand there and do dog watching, well, then my dog is a dog who watches dog, okay? I don't need to go and push him and make friends. I don't have to put my agenda onto him. And I realize how when I don't do that, after like an hour or so at the dog park, when other dogs come in, like a smaller dog, I don't have to do anything. He starts playing with them anyways. So it's like this is what I was earlier, which I did with maybe I would have done with the kids in my time, and I wasn't that self-aware about my own agendas, that I would have said, oh, children are sitting down, they're not doing anything, and I'm not a babysitter. Get up, everyone, and play cricket. Let me teach you how to throw a ball. And kids are like, we hate cricket now because we didn't want to do that, and now we hate it. So it's interesting how now I think that every time I take my dog out for walks, in the last 2-3 times I've taken him, I don't have an agenda for him. It's his time. It's a dog park for a reason. It's not a human park. It's a dog park. So let the dog do its thing. And that's what I thought. Our after school care is children's, my time, our place. It's such an important area where children should do it. And you and I sit there, observe, and then when needed, facilitate. Am I in the right track? Like, am I thinking right?
Yeah, I think so. I think this reminds me of like a really critical point, especially when you're talking about adult agendas and outside issues, is that in play, kids and dogs, it would seem, they do things when they're ready to do things. And our schooling system, the way we deal with kids is like 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're supposed to hit these markers. But the beauty about play and the beauty about children is that every kid is unique, and every kid finds different motivation to do different things. And one thing we're missing is allowing kids to do it at their own pace. And in that process, I think we actually, and this goes back to something we were talking about earlier as well, we sever that connection between learning and development with kids, because kids naturally do that within play, and play incorporates all of the culture around them. If kids see adults and the culture around them as reading as a very important aspect of their lives as they get older, and we take off the pressure that they need to learn to read by 7, kids will learn to read when they're ready. And because they do it when they're ready, they'll learn to read at a much faster pace. And that's been shown in studies. And I think that when they're ready part is the thing that we miss. And it's an adult agenda that they should be able to do this now. And it's like, no, when they feel safe, comfortable, and that takes in a million different variables in play, they'll speak up, they'll do what they need to do. They'll defend themselves even when they're ready to.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we're not observing, understanding play deprivation, understanding that some kids need help, but we need to understand that, you know, play just creates this environment for, at the right time, the right things will happen.
Love it.
I think understanding they may want to be there. So Serby may not be playing, but he probably still wants to go to that park.
Oh, he's excited to go there. He just doesn't play.
Because Haley, we have with Haley, she loves going to the park, but we call her the creeper. So she sits back for about half an hour and we'll just go around the play equipment and just watches all the kids. And if she can get under it, she'll go under it, but not on it really. Like this is why she's got the creeper name. And then eventually, but she loves going, but if you looked at her, you'd think she'd hate being there because she doesn't want to do anything. She's just watching and observing. And I've noticed she's a bit smaller than others, that she kind of watches how kids do things. And we may have kids doing this and we don't realize it either. Like, especially kids climbing, she kind of looks where they're putting their hands and feet. And then I'll notice her later, especially if no one's there. She might go give it a go, or an hour in when you're ready to go home. She's ready to play. But still, I think we can be conscious of that too. You might have kids sitting on the peripheral watching, but they might be still enjoying themselves. They might still want to be there and like watching that play too.
Yeah,
that's how they're going to learn. You know, if they have those, that's why the whole premise about multi-age play, you know, and the segregation of ages, like you learn from young and older. We're discounting their growth if we're not, you know, that, like you said, you're watching how that child goes upon those monkey bars, you know, from that older child who's doing it. There's so much to be learned there. And even the affordance of different things. Everyone talks about this growth mindset. You give a child a crate, they're going to play it in 100 different ways, but they're going to play it at the level they're at. You know, you're going to have the kid that's, you know, in year 6 that can, you know, stack a crate tire super high. You're going to get the kid in kindergarten just trying to step on top of it. You know, that's the beauty of these loose parts and all these different things. It meets them at their need.
And can I say on that as well, Barbie, that, I mean, that's a good example, because let's say you put her up on the climbing structure because she's looking at it and doing it, and maybe you think that she's hit a developmental period where she should be able to climb now, and then you put her up there. That might be too overwhelming for her, and that might actually completely stop her from climbing for years to come, because she's like, that was too much and I wasn't ready. And well-intentioned by the adult, but you know, and I think a good way to think about this, I think, is we're obsessed with problem solving in the education industry and in all childcare industries. We love problem solving, but we don't understand the concept of problem creation, and every child creating a problem that is relevant to them at that time, that provides them with the perfect amount of challenge so that they can potentially overcome it, build real self-esteem, and build their own platforms to where they can step up to something else. And, you know, this goes back to loose parts and educators that don't adulterate situations. They allow children to choose problems that are relevant to them. And that might be, I'm not climbing a tree right now. I'm not going to create that problem for myself because I'm not ready, you know. And for an adult to try and look at every individual kid and decide where they're at in their development, specifically to tree climbing and the million other aspects of play that happen, it's just an impossible task. But if we give them these environments that are manipulatable, where they have these freedoms, they'll create their own problems that are relative to them. And through understanding play, and we understand that children will always play at the edge of their capabilities, we can understand that they're going to create problems in their play and they're going to work through them appropriately with their friends and their peers and blah, blah, blah.
And that brings me back to that thing which I believe about learning, that willingness is so important for learning. If the learner is not willing in that very moment, no matter how much you are motivated to teach him or her, that person may not be ready for it. May see a value in it, perhaps in the process. Sometimes, you know, as a kid, I wasn't ready for perhaps chemistry, but then when we went to the class and kind of I found a way to love it in a way. but yeah, that could happen. But willingness, like when I chose to learn chemistry, is then when I started learning chemistry. I wasn't learning chemistry because I was put in that room. That's not when my learning started. My learning started when I thought, oh, I like it. I like making equations. So yes, I give credit to an adult to put me in that room because I didn't see a value in it. But at the same time, I go, oh, I love it. But I also would have loved that adult to allow me to come out of the room if I said, no, I'm not ready for it. not to just leave me there for a prolonged period of time and say, no, you will love it eventually because I loved it. Like, hang on, that's your problem, So this is important to understand that willingness is so important. But you know what? We already do this. We already do this with adults. If an adult says, I'm not coming to the party, you will ask that adult 2 to 3 times and then you'll stop it, right? Because adults have a very good way of saying to you, take it or leave it. This is me. Okay, that's it. But when a child says, take it or leave it, this is me, and they may not be using these words, but they are communicating through their body language, through not taking a part in the activity because they're not. We don't take it as if they are. We want them to be someone else in that moment at time. So we don't take it or leave it. We say, no, we're gonna make you in a different person right now, which I was trying with my dog. Bobby, you were gonna say something. Sorry.
Stems from a lack of understanding and therefore a lack of respect of not just play but childhood in general and what kids actually are, and for me again, Playwork was the field of study that opened my eyes to everything that kids are and what play is and all that, and allowed me to respect them so that I could sort of make those decisions, I think.
And I think for both of you, Cal and Izzy, did it help change your perspective on behaviour, what you may have perceived as bad behaviour earlier to maybe it was just the kids being born or just needing that outlet?
Well, I think it's part of it. It's trying to, distinguish between, a perceived behavior and a misbehavior, and the context. And that, like I said, it can look so different in a chaotic environment. You might see them, arguing or fighting over something. And I've been telling everyone to just stand back, because if you're understanding, if you see it through a kind of a Playwork lens, you're understanding cues and returns. You're seeing those kids offering out cues and returns, or you're seeing that kid trying to offer a cue and that kid's just not interested maybe, but you're understanding that cycle. And then you're not just seeing like, oh, that kid's misbehaving. There's a bit of context around it that then might influence how you then enact on that. If you're like, actually this kid is hitting this kid really hard, I need to stop that, or is there some kind of play behavior there? So Izzy?
And it goes back to what Izzy said about it's Playwork, and it's all holistically looking at the childhood development. Just understanding childhood cognitive development, physical development, social emotional development allows you to see then that this is not necessarily a misbehavior. Could be an undesirable behavior, because undesirable behavior is more personal, that I desire this, you didn't do it, so it's undesirable by my standards. But it's not necessarily a misbehavior, because it's completely appropriate in that very moment, given the cognitive development, given what the child is going through at this moment. But again, more knowledge, and this podcast is giving knowledge to me, and I'm hoping that people who are listening to this are getting knowledge. More knowledge gives you ability to observe more, and observe those small things which you might have earlier perhaps missed.
Sorry, Izzy.
Oh, thanks, Bobby. I was just going to say, Saurubh, you did a good job, I think, when you came to our service, breaking down that idea of like challenging behaviors instead of, thinking of them as challenging behaviors. And I think that's very Playworky, because hopefully that reflects back onto the adult, and it's like, this behavior is challenging me. And that's that's a point that I need to come from now. Why am I triggered by this behavior? And then we need to go through these critical reflective processes of like, why am I reacting like this? What's going on unconsciously? And, this is a very, very, very important role for a Playworker, and it can't be understated enough. And I think that transforms how you see behaviors. It transforms how you deal with behaviors that challenge you. And then you can work in a way where these behaviors that were once challenging, you understand them differently. And you let them play out and find that they actually sometimes come to a positive resolution. So I think that's really important. Not to say that you're not behavioral challenges anyway, but
and that is one of the things which I really like to keep saying more and more about this. Is it challenging behavior? Is it a behavior challenging you? Or even, is it a misbehavior or an undesirable behavior? Because really we have to take the onus on us that we may or may not understand this child's cognitive development at this moment of time, that we think that's misbehavior, but it could be just because I didn't want it and therefore it's a misbehavior. Because let's say if we all are together with the child, maybe the child may not even exhibit that behavior because we might have seen a cue in the past, or you might have seen a cue in the past, like a half an hour ago something happened. So I'll give you a quick example. I was at a school doing this hands-on training, and this I was told about this in the workshop, that hey, could you please watch this kid? Like when he comes, could you observe this kid? Like, yeah, sure. And as I was observing this kid, I could see this kid was playing with a ball and somebody else took the ball away. Now, of course, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to watch. Yeah. And this kid who took the ball away was actually taller and a bit stronger physically than this particular kid who was asked to be observed by me. Now, this kid is running around, the other kid is like following him, give me the ball, I was the first one with the ball, give me the ball back. And like, no, you can't have that. And when they throw the ball, he throws it to the other friend. So this guy becomes the pig in the middle, right? Now, nobody's observing that bit, okay, at the moment. And I didn't want to just stop it. I just wanted to see what was happening with it. And then they gave it to a girl. The girl gets the ball and she's showing the ball to him, again, a slightly taller girl. And this kid is like, give me the ball. And then she throws the ball at his face and she dances. And then they go away, right? Now, this is all play, negotiation, fighting for your rights, whatever is going on. But now, if you miss that opportunity to observe it, and then you said this child, the child who was at that time unheard, unappreciated, had to fight for his ball. Now, of course, when he sees a kid who he can use his physical strength against, because he's now really upset, he did something on that time. And I said, well, I saw that, and yes, I'm going to talk to this kid, but also I would have loved to talk to the other kids also when the other thing was happening. He's not, no behavior should be seen in isolation. So when Barbi mentioned something about behavior, Playwork and people involved in Playwork or any other development, like studying about children development, just gives us perspective on what are we observing for? What are we just seeing? Just the misbehavior or just all the other things which are? But this is a tangent that I can talk about for days. So let's not go there.
No, and I think that needs to be talked on for days because I don't think you ever really want to get to some black and white conclusion. And I think that as long as we appreciate that other side of, maybe that experience of that kid standing up for himself is a valuable experience in his childhood. And obviously there's limits to that. And we don't want kids to feel overwhelmed and experience maybe a traumatic experience where they don't feel safe at the service, obviously. But, this kid, and had you stepped in, Sarah, what are you telling that kid? You're telling him, A, you don't have the ability to stand up for yourself first.
Exactly.
You're probably going to label the other kids as, I won't use bad language, mean kids or something like that. Which, maybe they were being at the time, maybe they weren't. But once that gets solidified by the adult coming in and putting people in their perspective roles of victim and aggressor, it takes out the nuance of the situation and where that could potentially lead. And again, it doesn't mean that we never jump in and we don't help support kids, but it means we need to be far more nuanced and, I guess, thoughtful in when we do and how we do it.
Yes, absolutely.
It's called Display within Playwork. That is really handy. It's kids misfiring of play cues and how that leads to behavioral issues. But if you can look at it as a misfiring of play cues and how can we improve the play environment, then we can minimize display, hopefully, and therefore minimize behavior as well, without labeling kids as bad. Naughty, sort of things.
The naughty child, the challenging child.
Which is usually just the most playful child that is quite like really creative, really headstrong, usually really intelligent and can make smart decisions if we let him. That's quite often the kid that challenges us the most because they don't fit into these rigid structures and, the system that at its core doesn't have a lot of respect for kids in themselves.
It's the intelligence, isn't it? When we start fighting the intelligence, as that there is already intelligence within. When that intelligence starts manifesting, and if it's not in the direction we want, we find it quite challenging at times. I hope that the people who are listening to this will, coming from from Angus's podcast where we talked about introduce people to what Playwork is, and I'm still exploring this adult agenda versus kids agenda. And as Izzy said, that this conversation about behavior can go on for days. And I really hope that those who are listening are getting something from for themselves. At least I got something for my own dog. So that's I made a change in my dog walking schedule. And thank you very much, Calum, for being here. Calum, your experience as a practitioner and really living Playwork, and I had the opportunity and the pleasure to observe you be with the kids, and I hope that we all could be that way. Thank you very much for being here and sharing your experiences. And Izzy, thank you again. This is brilliant. I learned a lot. Barbi, what about you?
Yeah, I learn a lot. And so, like, I think it's important. So I've worked with children like 19 years or something. I'm always still learning and changing. Like, even like you mentioned the neuroscience before, like that development's been a lot more in the last 5 to 10 years. And just like even with some of the things you guys said before, I just never heard of. So I've put it in here for me to go look up and keep on learning. So I urge people listening too to look up. Like you mentioned the cues and return in play. I don't know a lot about that, but I want to go learn more about that because I think it just, even though I'm not working with children right now, I have a child, but I guess that innate desire to keep on learning because I'm passionate on it. You just want to keep learning more, keep learning new ways, and because everything comes back down, and you can tell with all of us and how we talk, it's all about the children and that quality for them and those experiences. So,
and as Izzy mentioned, it's all about the children, but more we inquire into this, and given that more we use the word better, but it just invites us to look within to our own childhood and to really inquire as to what's missing there, what happened that this is challenging to me, like becoming a bit more self-aware and therefore a bit more mindful being with the children, isn't it? Because we are in the position of power, so we can do whatever we want in that situation, but that's not the power. We don't want to use that power in the wrong direction, but rather sometimes, as you mentioned, display, as it should be dispower. So it should be like, so maybe just let them be and let them be the thing. And that's like letting go of control, and it's like confronting your own ego. That's a conversation we can again have, but that's what, when Izzy mentioned that, I was like, yeah, that's important, as working with kids has allowed me to grow continuously. So Izzy, any final words on your first and hopefully not the last time with OSH After the Bell podcast? Any final words, Izzy, do you have?
Not really, just like appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about this stuff. I think like once we all figure out, as we were saying before, how critical OSH time is, how critical children's play is, like, I think I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to this, and whether it is one person, it's corny, but that matters because we care about kids and we care about our societies moving forward. And so, yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity. Good to talk to all you guys as well. It's been ages since we've seen each other. So yeah, just good to catch a chat.
Cal, any final words for you?
Stay playful.
That's nice.
Keep exploring, keep on the journey. There's never a part where you get to where you have the absolute truth. Life's a journey. Keep exploring. You'll keep getting humble, and you'll keep finding out more about yourself. So never stop. Yeah.
Thank you. That was full of wisdom, those final words. Thank you very much, people. For and Barbi and I get the best seat in the town to learn these new things from all the new perspectives. So, and I really acknowledge Barbi for all you do for OSH After the Bell podcast, and I'm looking forward to when this gets released. And thank you again from OSH After the Bell podcast for being here, for giving your time. For those who are listening, you can help us. You can like our page, OSH After the Bell podcast, share the message to people. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music. You can also like Barbi's page, Firefly HR, which does a lot of HR work, as the name suggests, the outside school care and long day care. You can definitely like my page, We Belong Education, on Instagram and on Facebook, and also Izzy's page, which is Outsiders Play Advocate. Did I say it right?
Yeah, the Outsiders Play Advocates.
Yes.
We offer training in regards to sort of play work, and we work with schools and OSHs and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we'd
absolutely
love to go out and continue spreading the word. So the Outsiders Advocates, if everyone wants to get in touch, hit us up and we can talk more.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, people. And I do see your updates on going to all the schools and long day care and after school care you go. So Izzy, thank you very much for doing an amazing job. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Look after yourself and the people you love. From OSH After the Bell podcast, it's a goodbye.